is Daf Mem Vav. We're going to get started. I hope others will join, besides just Nava. Though Nava is enough. So today's Daf is Mem Vav. We're going to start from the Mishnah at the bottom of Mem Hey Amud Bet. Niftiru Ziknei Yushalayim al Chulahem. So we've been discussing in this parak the story of Egla Arufa, the very tragic and sad, not very tragic and interesting story, I would say, of when a body is found. Ki matzei chalal ba'adama, the pasuk says, they find a corpse on the ground. It's not in a city. The Beit Din near the town has to take responsibility because they're supposed to know what's going on. People are starving or people are homeless. They've got to be taking care of it. We talked about the Anshe Yerushalayim would come, the whole Sanhedrin. Says this Mishnah, the Niftru Ziknei Yerushalayim al Chulahem, the Sanhedrin would leave, and the Ziknei Oto Hayir, then it would come over to the Zikanim of that city, which was closest to the dead body. So the Zikanim of that city, Miviyin Eglat Bakar, they would have to bring a calf, right, which is a baby cow. Ashelo Mashcha Ba'ol, never pulled a yoke. Cows used to be used for work. This one was never used to work because it's too young. Now, says our Mishnah, however, Ein Amun Posel Bun. It could be have a mum, unlike a carbon, which can have a mum. An Egla Rufa, which is not going to be a carbon, can have a mum. Moridino to Nachal Eitan. They would take this cow and they bring it down to a Nachal Eitan. I'm going to translate Nachal Eitan as Nachal being a river bed, not a river, a river bed, meaning a cliff, like a cleft in the ground where things go down. Okay. So Nachal doesn't mean that there's rushing water necessarily, but it means it's a low place where water would come to. And Eitan means it's tough. What does tough mean? It says the Mishnah, Eitan kimashma'o, kasha. Eitan means like, you know the name Eitan? They're tough. Tough. Like, what's his name? Elton. Okay. Afal bishenu Eitan. Now, even if it's not Eitan, it's still kasher. It's not makiv. So even if it's not tough, it's okay. You would take a cleaver, that big knife, and you would break the neck of the animal from the back, unlike shchita, which you do from the front. With the orif, you would use the kupitz, which is a very tough thing, like the butcher's cleaver, to break the spine. The place that you do this is you're not allowed to ever plant there or to do work there. But you can spread out your pishtan to you want to air it out to get rid of all the flax and everything. Or to clean out your stones. You're trying to pick good stones from bad stones. You can use the ground for that. You just can't dig into the ground. Now, the Izkanim would then wash their hands in water at the place where they broke the neck of this animal. And they would say that what the pasuk says, our hands did not kill this person, did not spill the blood. And our eyes did not see. As we said earlier, what we think these these rabbis killed the person. Anyone think that the Zkanim are the ones actually killing the person? Ella means he didn't come and leave our town without the food that the person needed or without the accompaniment and the protection. And so we're not even indirectly involved in his death, though we are somewhat responsible because it is in our jurisdiction, it's near our town. The Kohanim say, who are the Kohanim? Now, when we said earlier that the Bnei Levi would be Nigash in this whole ceremony, so there were also Kohanim, and the top of Daf Mem Vav, they would say, Kaper Lamcha Yisrael Shepatita Hashem, let God forgive the nation Yisrael, there shouldn't be free blood, there shouldn't be innocent people being killed among your nation. Yisrael Amcha Yisrael. And lo yitzrichim lomar, they didn't have to say the end of the pasuk, which is nechaper lahem adam, ela ruach hakodesh bin varsartam, that actually came from Hashem, essentially. In Matai, what is it saying? When shetasu kacha hadam mitkaper lahem. If you do this process and you go and you do the ceremony and you show how sad we feel about the fact that this person was killed and that this person was abandoned and no one to protect them, then you will get a kapara for this terrible, terrible act, terrible death. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? How do you tell me that a mum, we said in our Mishnah that a mum by Egla Rufa is not posel, unlike a regular carbon. Ask me, what about a kal v'chomer? A mum posel be'egla mi kal v'chomer. Why don't we say that a mum is posel by an Egla Rufa from a kal v'chomer from another funny animal, which is a para aduma, a red heifer, which is another kind of cow, right? Ma para shena shanim doslotbo. A para is not posel if it's 2 years old. But remember, Egla Rufa has to be a baby, right? But a mum poselba, so years don't posel it, meaning it can be more than a year old, but it can't have a mum. So egla sheshanim poselba and egla rufa, which can't be 2 years old. So it's more chamar. Mum poselba. Shouldn't it also be posel if it has a blemish? Well, you're right. It's a good kal v'chomer, but shani hatam, it's different than makra. Asher ein ba mum. It says by paraduma, it can't have a mum. Ba asher ein ba mum posel. Then mum posel ba agala. Egla, right? A mum, not agla, an egla. A mum is posel by paraduma, but a mum is not posel by egla rufa. So then maybe you should say that other avodot, meaning other, remember, an egla rufa, it says that you can't do any work with it, right? So if that was true, and we'll see why we're asking this in a second, right? If it's true that ba, Rashi says ba is a miyud, then why do you say not by egla rufa, but by paraduma, that you're not, paraduma is the same thing, right? Paraduma can never have been worked with. It's an animal that was never used to pull in a plow or to carry people or things like that. So how do you know that shar avodot, meaning other things besides regular pulling of a plow, also posel and make it that you can't use a paraduma? Alam amar v'yudamarav, you have to place in yechala udashel sakin. You put a bunch of bags on the back of a para just to sort of hold them while you're waiting. It's a very easy thing, right? A bunch of sacks, but they're not carrying anything. Still, it's psula. By egla roof, sorry, by paraduma, a sack of bags would passel. Egla rufa timashech. Just putting it on the back doesn't passel. It has to be that it actually walks with it. It has to actually carry it. So this markashani para dialfinan olo mi egla. You learn out para ol from egla rufa. Just like by egla rufa, you can't do work. By para, you can't do work. Says Mar. So too. If you say ol, meaning one says ol and one says ol, and therefore you compare them the other way. Egla nami teti ol mi para. That just like a para can't have a mum, and egla rufa can't have a mum. The Torah said ba be'egla nami ba by paraduma. That paraduma asher lo uvad ba asher mum ein ba. The mum can't be in there, but that's only by paraduma. There's a mum problem, but not by egla rufa. Okay, it's like Yoni's chart there. It says so what? Be'egla nami ba be'egla nami tiv. It says ba by egla rufa also. Is that what you're pointing to? Not even a little bit. Okay, ba by egla nami tiv. Because it says the word ba by egla rufa too. That's telling you that it's excluding kachim, other carbanotes. Because you might have thought, look, a paraduma you're not allowed to do any work with. An egla rufa you're not allowed to do any work with. What about a regular carbon chatas? Can you take an animal that was worked in the field? Is it proper to take an animal that you were using yesterday to pull your plow and say, today I'm bringing this animal to Hashem? Maybe you can't. Maybe shar kachim and avodah would passel them. It's wrong. It's not. The low passel go avodah. Avodah does not passel other kachim. I would have thought that you should learn out other kachim from a kavachomer from egla rufa. Ma egla. Mum poselba. Mum does not passel egla rufa, so it's really not such a strict thing. But avodah is poselot. Well, but if it worked, it's passel. So kachim shemum poselot bahen. A carbon, which we already learned, you can't bring it if it has a mum. Eino din shavodah poselot bahen. So it seems like a really good kal v'chomer. If a carbon which can have a mum, right, an egla rufa which can have a mum can't be worked with. Certainly, a carbon which can have a mum you can't be worked with. Says Mar, you're right. Ikel mifrach. Well, therefore, we have a question on it, or the way you can answer the kal v'chomer is ma le'egla shekain shanim postosba. Egla rufa can't be 2 years old. Atu kachim milak the pasu shanim, but it's true about kachim. Some carbanotes can't be 2 years old. Some can be, and some can't be. It's chukra. Well, you're right, but you need a pasuk lahanach kachim the pasu shanim, right? You need a pasuk for the kachim that don't have a psul with years. And therefore, since they don't have a psul, they do have a psul with years. And therefore, they have a psul with years. They're just as strict as an egla rufa. And you might think that since an egla rufa is not allowed to have avodah done with it, maybe the same thing is true about kachim. Kamashmal, that's not the case. Hi, Robert. Thanks for joining us. Can you hear us? Hope so. I'll catch him up in a second. It says, is that true? It says in the pasuk, iveret or shavor or charutz or yabelet or garav or yalefet. These are all different mumim, different abnormalities in the animal that's kachim. It says the pasuk lo takrivo eila lashem. You don't bring these karbanot to Hashem. Eila, now here's the limud. Eila yatamakriv avatamakriv kachim shnev damam avodah. You can't bring these karbanot to Hashem, but you can bring karbanot shnev damam avodah. You can bring karbanot that you did work with, that were worked on in the Beit HaMikdash, not in the Beit HaMikdash, that worked on in the field. This is Marvel Itztra. Robert, we're 3 lines in the last narrow lines on Mem Vav Amid Aleph that to give you the place. I'll give it to you again in a second. I might have thought that the only time you're not allowed to do avodah is where you didn't do avodat heter, right? Where you did work with them that you're allowed to do, like you put them in the field. You worked to plow the fields. Aval avodat isur. Let's say you took your animal to do something really wrong. You took your animal to worship an avodah zarah, not with the animal, but you drove it to make kilayim, right? You're not allowed to plant kilayim, so you did your animal to pull kilayim. Remember, kilayim is when you plant 2 different species together, right? So let's say you took your animal to do that. Ema litzru. So maybe that animal then can't be a karban. Tzricha. So you have a pasuk to tell you that. Ask remember that also we know from somewhere else. Hanami me'acha nafka. We know it from another pasuk. It says the following: Miyad ben nechar lo takrivo et lechem Elohechem mikol eila. Right? You shouldn't take karbanot or bread from a ben nechar, from a non-Jew. Eila yata makriv. These you can't bring as a karban. Avata makriv kadshim shnev dam avodah. We learned in a bright that you can bring kadshim shnev dam avodah. Itzra. We need it for one more case. You might have thought the only time you're not aser an animal for a karban that you did work with is if you did work when it was not a karban. It was just a regular cow. You did work with it. But then you said, I want this cow to be a karban. Then if you did work with it, which you're not allowed to do because it's called mi'ilah in hektish, right? You're not allowed to use something that was dedicated to hektish. You might think in that case it would become aser. It's tzricha that it's not. It never becomes aser. So that an animal that is used for a karban is allowed to be worked with avodah, but an animal for a paraduma or a egla rufa can never have avodah done with it. Okay, gufa. Let's go back to a previous halacha to ask about how an animal is aser for work if it's an egla rufa. I'm going to review Marav. If you take a sack of a bunch of sacks and you put it on top of a paraduma, it becomes puzzle because that's considered to be work. It was like your storage center, right? But be'egla, it's not usher if you just put it on the back. It's achet timshoch until you pull it and actually walks with these things for you. Neitvei, what about the following bright? The bright quotes, it says you didn't put an ol, you didn't put a yoke on top of your egla rufa. It says the Braita, ainli ela ol. I only know that you're not allowed to use a egla rufa if you put a yoke on it. Shar avodot minayin. Let's say you use the egla rufa to stamp on your grapes, or to knock over your wall, or to carry you to market. How do you know that's also pasul? Amr kal v'chomer. They said a kal v'chomer. Ma egla. Egla rufa. Ein mum posel ba. Shar avodot poslot ba. I'm sorry, this Braita is talking about paradum. Right, by egla, a mum, remember, this is the principle of our Mishnah. A mum is not possible in egla rufa. But shar avodot poslot ba. But other avodah pasos, meaning an animal that does avodah, is not kosher as an egla rufa. Para shemum posel ba. If you have a paraduma which cannot be used if it has a mum, eno din shar avodot poslot ba. Says Gemara, v'im nafshech lomar. And if you have an answer against that kal v'chomer, well, I've got another rule. Nemer kan ol. It says by paraduma the word ol. But nemer lahalon by egla rufa the word ol. Just like the word all by Egla Arufa is referring to any work that Egla Arufa does makes it pasul. Afkan, so too by paraduma shavadot poslot. The Gemara, of course, always asks, right? What does it mean im nafshach lomer? If you want to answer against it, my im nafshach lomer, meaning what's your argument against my kal v'chomer? Says the Gemara, because you might be able to say ikal lemifra. I can uproot your kal v'chomer because I can say that there's no kal v'chomer from Egla Arufa to paraduma. Mala Egla shekin shalim poslot ba. Remember, we said this many times. What's special about Egla Arufa is that it can't be 2 years old, right? So it's more chomer. Inami kachim yochia. Well, what about the fact that kachim are mochia? Shemum posel behem ve'in avodah posel behem. So nemar kan ol nemar lahalan ol. It says by both paraduma and by Egla Arufa asher lo Allah alav ol. It didn't have a yoke. Ma lahalan, just like by Egla Arufa, we know shar avodot afkan shar avodot. Now, just before I answer the next point, how do you know by Egla Arufa? Because the pasuk by Egla Arufa says, "Asher lo Allah alav ol, asher lo ubadba," right? No work was done with it, so it actually speaks it out explicitly. Says the Gemara, "Mimakim shabata." What's the next words? You can learn from the same place that you came. Am I doing the right thing? No. What are we up to? Yeah. Afkan shavodot mimakom shabata says, well, how do you know? So now I've got a problem. The only way you know that you're not allowed to put work with a paraduma besides a yoke is because you learned that from Egla Arufa. But now you're telling me, oh, but by Egla Arufa, if you put a sack of bags on it, a bundle of bags, it's not possible until you walk. But by paraduma, it's possible just from being there. But the only way you know paraduma can't have work is from Egla Arufa. So how could you be more chomer than the thing you're learning it from? That's a problem with kal v'chomer. That's when you're right. Tanahi. In fact, it's a machloket tanaim. The ika damaiti la me'egla. Some people learn that a paraduma cannot have work from Egla Arufa, in which case you can't be more strict than Egla Arufa. Because if you learn a kal v'chomer from something, right, there's a principle, dayo lavom adin liot kenidon. You can only do as much as you learned it from. But ika damaiti la megufa de para. Some people learn it out from the actual psukim by para, not from Egla Arufa, in which case you have no problem. The time, let's quote that Braita. It says the word ol by the word a yoke by paraduma. It says the Braita in the ella ol. I only know that you can't use a yoke on a paraduma. Shar avadot minayin. How do you know that you can't do any work with the paraduma? Talmud Lomar, it says asher lo Allah Allah ol. Mikom makom. The words asher is, I think, what we're darshaning, is meaning everything. Any type of work that you could do with it would be aser. In came matam all. Well, if everything is aser, why say a yoke? Just say you didn't do any work with it. It's telling you that if you put a yoke on a cow, it can never be a paraduma, even if you didn't use the yoke to pull the animal to work. Whether you put it on it for practice or for fun, or you did it when you're actually using the animal to work. Shar avodot, but other work, in poslot ela b'shat avodah, they only pass on if you're actually doing work with the animal. The ema says, well, why don't you say it's a klal prat? Asher lo Allah aleha, so not the word asher, but it says asher lo Allah aleha, which literally means nothing went on top of it. That sounds like a klal. Everything that you do for this animal will pass on. Then it says, oh, a yoke, which is a prat. And a klal and prat, the rule is ein b'chlal al mashe b'prat. You only apply the limited circumstances of the prat, of the detail, to the klal. Why don't you say all in midia achrina lo, right? Why don't you say only a yoke, no other work should passel by a paraduma? Because the word asher ribuyahu, that's what I was saying earlier. The word asher adds more things, and so that's how we know that everything is prohibited. Tanya nami gabi egla ki hagavna. We have the same kind of braita by Egla Arufa, just like we just quoted by paraduma, and now we're quoting the braita. The word says "ol." Got it? Here, "ol." Ainli ella ol from Egla Arufa. I only know that you can't put a yoke on it. Shar avodot minayin. How do you know you can't do other work with it? Talmud asher lo ubadba, which has not had work. Mikol makom. Says all. So why say a yoke if really every work would be prohibited? Because all posel be mishat avodah, like we just said by paraduma, a yoke passes whether you're working with it or not. Shar avodot ein posot el b'shat avodah. The ema. So why didn't you say the same klal prat? Asher lo ubad ba klal. You didn't do any work with the animal means you can't do any work. Then it specifies old. You can't do a yoke. Prat. And the rule is klal pratim b'klal masher b'prat. You only learn the detail from the rule. Ol in midiachrina lo. And again, the same exact answer. Asher ribuyahu. So that's why you don't say a klal prat, because the word asher tells you more things, and that's how you know that you're not allowed to work with a para aduma or an egla rufa in any way, including with a yoke, but not only with a yoke, in any way that it works. Adam Rabbi Yavo. 6 lines from the bottom. Boy minem Rabbi Yochanan. We asked Rabbi Yochanan, Meshichat ol bekama. How, when we say that you have to pull the animal with the yoke, how far do you have to pull it? Foot, 2 feet, 10 feet? Amarle kimale ol, as long as the yoke, have you seen a yoke? Comes off the back of an animal and it pulls a plow. It's maybe 10 feet or something. Okay. So ibailu, the arco or the rachbo. Remember, the way you used to have it is it could be the width or the length. There you go. Okay. So these would attach to the animal, this and this. The question is, would it be the width of it or the length of it, which is probably longer, right? So the arco or the rachbo, is it the width of it or the length of it? Where am I? So one rabbi answered, Rabbi Yaakov Shnei, the didim partially made Rabbi Yochanan. You know, Rabbi Yochanan once told me, Meshichat all the rachbo tefa. The all that you have to pull is the width, and it's a tefa, which is nothing, like this long. So why didn't you say tefa? Why didn't you say the width is a tefa? Name a tefa. Kamash Milan, shiur all tefachu. This taught you that the all has to be a minimum of a tefa. You can't have it less than this wide. Who cares? That's when you go to the store. If you go and buy a yoke, and you get it delivered to your door from Amazon, and it's too narrow, you could say it wasn't a proper yoke, right? They didn't have Amazon, but so that's the definition of what a yoke is. It has to be a tefach wide. Why did the Torah say you should bring the eglah down in the riverbed? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yavo davar shlo asa pirot. Right, the riverbed is rocky, it's deep, nothing grows there, right? Either because it gets stormed down or because it's just very rocky, it's bad. So go to a place where nothing will grow, and you should be mechaper there because this man who died is no longer going to get any pirot. He's dead, right? Ye'araf makom she'en oseh pirot, right? Take a davar shlo asa pirot, which is a cow that's immature, hasn't yet grown up and done anything in the world. It hasn't worked. The ye'arof, and you should break its neck b'makom she'en oseh pirot, in a place, in a riverbed where there was never going to grow any fruit. V'yichaper al mishlo hinichu lasot pirot, and should be a kapara for a person who was killed when he was no longer, before he was able to fulfill his life. Assume, what do you mean, fulfill his life? My pirot. What's the fruit of a man? Elim a period of a rivya, if you're saying it's having children, so then what if the man was an old man who got killed and married kids? El miata zakein, or let's say he was sterile, so he couldn't even have kids. So you don't do eglah rufa. Ella mitzvahs. The thing that he's missing are doing mitzvot. That's his perot. The fruit of a person are the mitzvot that they do. And so this person was killed. He no longer can do mitzvot, and he's been deprived of his fruit. Says the Mishnah, Eitan kimashmo kashet. Tarabana, minayin eitan shu kashet. And the word eitan means fierce, strong, powerful. Shenemar, eitan moshavecha. Yeah, no, I feel. Eitan moshavecha, the place where you live is tough. Visim bisela kinecha. What's a sela? A rock. You place it in the rock. The Omer, it says, Shimu harim et riv Hashem. Listen to God. Listen the mountains, to the fight of Hashem. The eitanim, the strong ones, mostei aretz. That's how you know eitan means the powerful ones. Eitan actually means old, ancient. Shnamar goy eitanhu, that they are a nation of strength, meaning goy me olamhu, they're an old, ancient nation. So that's where you go. My time, huh? How do you know that you kill it from the neck, from the back? We said by chatat off that you take off the back, mimul arpa, it says, from the opposite of its face, and therefore you do the same thing here. Okay, you're not allowed to work the place where you killed the eglah aruf. It says take a thing, a land that wasn't worked and wasn't planted. Lish'avar, that means it was never planted in the past. Different Rabbi Yeshaya. Yonatan says l'haba. It means in the future. Once you've made this place in Eglah Arufa, it's like a monument. You can't ever work it and forget about it. Rav Amar lahaba, tekuli amalo pligi. Everybody agrees that it's lahaba. Dichtiv lo yizarea. Says you will not do it in the future. Kipligi l'shavar. And Yeshaya savar miktiv v'lo ya'aved lo yu'ubad. It means the past. Rabbi Yonatan miktiv asher lo ne'evad. Rabbi, it doesn't say you never worked. It says lo yu'uvad in the future. Rabbi Yeshaya asher l'shavar masher Yonatan asher ribuyahu. So they argue about how to read the pasuk. Everyone agrees that you cannot work this place in the land in the future. There's a machloket about whether it has to be a place that was never used in the past. Now, we're almost done, don't worry. Mutar l'srok sham pishtan v'naker sham avanim. You can use the land, although you can't dig into it. You can't plant fruit trees or corn. You can clean off your pishtan. You can clean off your rocks, and you can use it as earth. You can play football there. That's the equivalent, right? Tanu Rabbanan. Asher lo yu'avad ba'avli yizarea im li'el. I only know you can't plow, you can't plant it, seeds. Shar avodot minayin, how do you know that you can't do other avodot? Tamalom asher lo ya'abed ba, mikol makom, you can't do any work. Im kein ma tamalom lo yizarea. So why did the Torah say you didn't plant there? If you can't do any work, of course you can't plant. Why add plant? Planting, keep a gufa shel karka. You got to go deep into the ground. Any work that's deep in the ground is prohibited, but things that are on the surface, yatsa srikat pishtan, or nikur avanim, or playing football, sheinam begufan shel karka, those are okay. Asking her again the same question you had 3 times today. Ema shelo ya'abedba is a klal. You didn't do anything there. Lo yizarei is prat. Klal branim b'chal mashen prat is riyah in midach minalo. Maybe only planting is prohibited. No, again, the word asher ribuyahu. The word asher adds to it and makes it more things than just a klal of prat. Continue the Mishnah, Ziknei ha'yeru chatzin yadehem. The elders would wash their hands and they would say, Yadeinu lo shafchu et adam hazeh. Our hands do not slaughter and spill this blood. Tanu Rabbanan. Says the Braita, we're on the 3rd of the most wide lines on Daf Mem Vav Amud Bet. It says, V'kol ziknei ha'ir hahi hakrovim el halal. All the elders of that city that are close to the dead body, yirchatzu et yedehem al agala arufa b'nachal, she'ein tamlom ha'arufa. Why does it say ha'arufa? Could say egla arufa. Not tamlom ha'arufa, al makom arifato shel egla. They have to go to the spot. They have to be exactly where you killed it. Okay? V'amru, and they say, now this is a quote from the pasuk, Yadeinu lo shafku et adam hazeh, our hands did not spill this blood, eineinu lo ra'u, and our eyes did not see. Ask the Gemara again, like the Mishnah said many times. They anyone really think that these guys killed him? He didn't come to our hands and be freed and be sent off without food. We never let him go out of the city into the dangerous night. Right? This man had no place to stay in the city. He found nowhere to live, so he had to go out to the village, out to the fields, and obviously it's very dangerous. And the custom back then, which still should be today, is that if a person left your house to a place of danger, you got to wait till they make it to the next house. You got to accompany them. You got to take them till they're safe. You can't just, release someone into the wild without any provisions for their safety. And so Beit Din was saying, we do not do that. Tanya Hayrabi Meir Omer, Kofin L'Levaya. You force a person to escort a guest to the next place. Meaning it's not an optional thing. It's a thing that Beit Din would force a person to do. If you're a host, you live in a city, and you have a guest and they have to leave your house, or you kick them out, or they stop paying their rent, you have to make sure they get to the next place safely. We'll see what that means in a second. Sheschar halevaya ein lashiur. There's no limit to the reward for accompanying another person. Shenemar, because it says a very, very funny or fascinating story in Shoftim. But Yerua Shomronim Ish, remember there was a city that they were having trouble conquering in the days of the Shoftim. And the city was called Luz. And the problem with Luz, as we said, is that they couldn't figure out where the entrance to the city was. It was an invisible entrance. I don't know what that means. They couldn't figure it out. One day, the Shomrim, right? We are Shomrim, Ish Yotzei Min Ha'ir. They found a man leaving the city. They saw a guy leaving. They didn't see where he was leaving from, but they saw all of a sudden a person who was leaving the city. And they said to him, Haranu Nat Mavo Ha'ir. Show us how you get into the city. We will be kind to you. And it says, he showed them, he didn't take them there, he showed them, we'll see what that means in a little bit, the entrance to the city. So what did they do for him? They killed every person by the sword. They freed him and they sent him away. Where'd they send him? Continues the pasuk. This is now the next pasuk in Shoftim. The man went to the land of the Chitim, which is far off the other direction. He built a new city. Luz. The name of that city is Luz up till today, till 2023. Tanya, this is the famous city Luz where they would have the skill to make the dye of the tchelet. When Sancheiriv came and conquered the world, the one city that he couldn't get into was Luz. And Nebuchadnezzar came, he didn't destroy it. Even the Malach HaMavet cannot make it to that city. Luz is a protected eternal city. What happens in eternal cities? People get very, very old. Ella Zkinim Sheba, when the elderly people in the city, Bisman Shedatam Katzalehem, when they get sick of living, they get really old and they're just tired of life, they leave the city. You have to walk out of the city because you will live forever. Well, living forever doesn't seem to be as fun as it sounds like in the movies, right? And they die. Now, that's the story of the city of Luz. This is a Kal V'chomer. Maknani Zeh, right? This guy who left the city, he wasn't Jewish, first of all, right? And Lo Diber B'Piv, he didn't even tell them where the city entrance was. Lo halach l'raglav, he didn't walk them to the entrance of the city. He just pointed to it. And Garam Hatzalah Lo L'Zara Hatzef Kol Hadorot. He caused himself and his descendants to be saved forever. Misha Asa Leviyah B'Raglav. This person who actually walks a person out and shows them the way to safety with his feet. Halachat Kama V'Kama, that he will get reward forever. Now, how did this Kanani show them the city of Luz? He used his mouth to you can make shapes, like indicate where it's going to be. He made a crooked mouth. And Rabbi Yonatan Amar Be'etzbo Alam, he pointed to it. Tani Kavati de Rabbi Yochanan, there's actually a brighter like Rabbi Yochanan, B'shvil Sheknani Zeh, Hera Be'etzbo, because he pointed with his finger to show them where the entrance to the city was, Garam Hatzalah Lo L'Zara Hatzef Kol Hadorot. He caused salvation for him and his family forever. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Hamahalech B'derech Ve'en Lo Leviyah. Let's say, God forbid, you're going somewhere dangerous and you have no one to accompany you. So what should you do? Yasok b'Torah. Don't daven. You should learn Torah. You should learn Daf Yomi. Shenemar kelivyat chen heim l'roshecha. They, referring to the Torah, are a liviyah of beauty. It's an accompaniment of beauty on your head, v'anakim legagrotecha, and beautiful things on your goren. Because of the 4 steps, others have 4 amot, but because of the short distance that Paro escorted Avraham when Avraham was leaving Mitzrayim. Remember, Avraham went down with his wife Sarai, right? And Paro wanted to take her, and then they gave him Rechush Gadol, and then Paro escorted him. Shenemar vayitzav alav Paro anashim, to take him away. Because of that zechut, that Paro sent people to walk with Avraham, nishtabed bebanav arba meot shana. They were servants for 400 years for those 4 amot, 4 steps that Paro took. Shenemar vavdum v'nyotam arba meot shana. If you escort someone else even 4 amot, they will not be damaged, right? Meaning it's magical, essentially. It's not just that you're there accompanying the person. The fact that you left with them from the house means that they are full of your spirit, and therefore they will not be damaged by, they used to worry very much about being damaged by metaphysical things, by spirits, by shedim. Where am I? Ravina alevei iluve the Rava bar Yitzchak arba amot be'ir. Ravina escorted Rava bar Yitzchak 4 amot. Mata liyadei hazeka itnatzil. He bumped into some bandits, but he was saved from them because of this levia. Tanarabanan Rav the Talmid, its teacher for his student, ad iburo shel ir. You should actually walk them out till the exit of the city. Iburo means like the pregnant part, the pushed out part, the most far part of the city, but not outside the city. Chaver lechaver, one person for a friend of his, right, meaning a Talmid Chacham to a Talmid Chacham, should walk that person out ad Tchum Shabbat till Tchum is like a kilometer, right? Like half a mile outside of the city, 10-minute walk, 15-minute walk, 20-minute walk, right? Talmid l'Rav, a student for his teacher, ein lo shiur. There's no end. You got to keep walking, okay? The comma. Now, of course, there's a shear. You don't walk till the next house, otherwise you never get home. Rav Sheshet ad parsa means 4 mil, an hour. Below Amr el Rabba Shem Mufak, but that's only your rabbi who's not your main rabbi. Av Rabba Mufak, if he's your permanent rabbi, shlosha parsot. You got to walk for 3 hours. Again, it would be hard to get anything done. Rav Kahana Luveler of Simi Barashi, Mipomnara at Beit Sinita de Bavel. Rav Kahana led Rav Simi Barashi from Pomnara, which I guess is in, I don't know where it is. It sounds like it's near the river. Beit Sunita de Bavel, into this place in Bavel, which had a lot of Sunita, which are palm trees. Okay, so he walked him all the way to the field of palm trees. Kimata hatam amrlei vaday damitu hani Sunita de Bavel mishnei adam rishon etinu. You know what people say? These palm trees are here. They're original palm trees from the days of Adam Harishon. Can you imagine? Amrlei. Oh, you know what? Atkarta milta damar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. You reminded me of something Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina said. What did Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina say? My dichtiv, it says, you ready for this pasuk? Fascinating pasuk, okay? In your mio. The aretz, where am I? Yeah. You went to a land, right? Asher lo avar ba'ish. A man never walked through this land. V'lo yashav adam sham, and no one lives there. Now, if no one ever went there, how did anyone live there, right? If no one ever walked through the land, of course nobody lives there. Ella, what the pasuk is telling you is lo avar ba'ish. If in any land where a person has never come, that's because lo yashav adam sham, because Adam Harishon never went there. That Adam Harishon defined civilization for the entire world, and wherever Adam went and said this is going to be a city, eventually became a city. And if Adam didn't go there, it never was populated. El Eretz shegazar ala Adam Harishon leishov. Any place that Adam Harishon said will be populated, nityashva. Eretz lo gazar Allah Adam Harishon lo nityashva. Okay, beautiful, beautiful pasuk. Rav Mordechai Iluve Rav Ashi Miagrunya Lad Bekipi. He walked him from Agrunya. We don't know where these places are, but they sound very far away, at least. From Agrunya to Bekipi, Vamilad Beidora, and some say even further. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Meir. We're going to go 3 more minutes. Said Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Meir. We're 10 lines from the bottom. Kol she'eno milaveh mitlaveh. Anyone who doesn't accompany a person on his way, kil shofich damim. It's as if you killed the person. If the people of Yericho had walked out Elisha, then the bears would not have killed the kids. What was the story? Remember this crazy story in Elisha. Shenemar, now we're going to quote the pasuk in Elisha. It's a beautiful, crazy story. It says, Vayal Misham Beitel. Elisha left there to go to Beitel. V'hu oleh b'derech. He's walking down the road. U'na'arim kitanim yatzu min ha'ir. Some little kids. We're going to ask, what are na'arim kitanim? A nar is a teenager, a katan is a baby, right? So how can you be both? Nowadays, it's not so complicated. Na'arim kitanim yatzu min ha'ir, v'yitkalsuba, and they were cursing him. They saw Elisha, and they said, v'yomru lo, alei kireach, hey, the baldy's coming here. The bald guy. Amru lo, he said to them, Allah shakarachat aleinu et hamakom, right? On you, Hashem will cause you to be balded, basically, meaning you're going to get into big trouble. Okay. Now, why was he calling them Narim? Why were they called Narim Kitanim? Remember Lazar, they weren't Na'arim. Na'arim means teenagers, right? They were not Na'arim, they were Kitanim, but they were Ni'urim, they were empty. Na'ur means empty. Shenu'urim min ha-mitzvot, they were empty from mitzvot. Kitanim shahim kitanei emunah, they had no faith in God. Tana, in fact, the Braita says, Na'arim hayu, they in fact were teenagers. Ubizbizu atzman ki kitanim, but they would spend their time, wasting their time like little babies. So they were not acting like true mature teenagers, like the teenagers I know. Matkin for Rav Yosef, Dilma Hashem Mekomam. Why were they called Na'arim? Because they came from a city called Ni'urim, right? Miloktiv, it says, Va'aram yatsu gidudim. Aram went out armed. V'yashvu me'eretz Yisrael na'ara ktana. They took a na'ara ktana. Now we asked the same question there. What's a na'ara ktana? If you're a na'ara, you're not a ktana. The kashilan, we asked, what's na'ara uktana? V'amarav pedat kitana de min Ni'urim. She was a Ketana, but she came from the city of Ni'urim, so she was called Na'ara Ketana. Says, well, you're right, that makes sense there, because there it doesn't say where they came from, so they came from Ni'urim. Hatam Mefarish Mikoma. Hacha, it says that they came from Yericho. Mefarash Mikoman. Elisha turned around, he saw these kids, and he cursed them in the name of God. Now, what do you mean he saw? What did he see? Mara'ah, Amrav, Ra'am Mamish. No, it doesn't mean he saw them. It means he stared at them. He gave them the evil eye. If the rabbis looks at someone in that way, omita o oni, either they die or they become poor, which is equivalent, right? And Shmuel says, no. Ra'ah, what he saw was shekulan nitabra behem iman b'yom kippurim. He saw that this was a bunch of riffraff. All of them came from a bad place. They all had mothers who became pregnant on Yom Kippur, which you're not allowed to have intercourse on. So clearly they came from bad seed, and that was why he cursed them. And Rabbi Yitzchak Nafpa said, Bluryat ra'alahan kamuraim. He saw they were dressed like Emorites. They were wearing like long hair that was tied up in a way that Avodah Zarah was. Rabbi Yochanan Amar ra'a shlohayta behem lichluchit shel mitzvah. He saw that they had no moisture of mitzvah, right? They had no mitzvahs in them, and that's why he cursed them. So what if they had no mitzvahs, right? A person can have nothing good, but what can they sometimes have? Children, and their children could do a mitzvah. So how could you kill a person when you don't know what's going to be their future? Dilma bizarinu nihu nahave. Maybe their children would have mitzvot. Amr Belazar, he saw lo bam lo bizaram atzuf kol hadarot. They had nothing redeeming forever, and therefore he cursed them, and they died. They were attacked by the bears, and the bears ate them up. And that we're going to see tomorrow at the bottom line what happens when the bears came out and where these bears were, kind of Bernstein bears. So Yashakoach, a very long daf. Thank you, Robert, for joining. Thank you, Navin, for joining, and I hope Dov will pick up there tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much.
Of Mem Vav Amud Bet.
I
take care. Sorry about.
I thank you. And by the way, I became a grandfather today for the 5th time.
Mazal Tov, wonderful.
My daughter had a boy.
Mazal Tov, you should have much nachat and zchut from that child and all of Klal Yisrael.
Amen. Thank you.
And we'll see. I'll see you again next week for the next. It's going to be a new Masechta next week, God willing. Okay. Mazal Tov.
I'm going for Mincha now.
Okay, just in time.